a boy was mocked for his old shoes. But years later, they laughed when he returned as a star athlete. What they didn't realize was that every single laugh, every cruel whisper, every moment of mockery was fueling something unstoppable inside him. This is the story of how a kid with nothing became the athlete everyone wanted to know, and how he returned to face the very people who tried to break him. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the greatest victories aren't just about crossing the finish line. They're about refusing to break when everyone expects you to. Marcus Chen stood at his locker, pretending not to notice. But he could feel it. That familiar weight of eyes on him. Not curious eyes, judging eyes. His shoes were falling apart. The sole was separating from the leather, creating a gap that widened with every step. The laces were frayed, held together by knots upon knots. The leather itself was cracked and faded, a patchwork of wear and neglect. They weren't just old shoes, they were broken shoes. The kind of shoes that told a story nobody wanted to hear. He'd bought them 2 years ago from a thrift store. They'd lasted longer than he expected. But now, in the hallway of Lincoln High School, surrounded by kids wearing pristine Nikes, fresh Jordans, and spotless Adidas, Marcus's shoes looked like they belonged in a museum of poverty. "Yo, check out Chen's kicks," Derek called out from down the hall. Marcus's stomach dropped. Derek wasn't just any student. Derek was the kind of kid who made the rules about what was cool and what wasn't. He was tall, athletic, confident. The type of guy who could say anything, and it would become truth simply because he said it. Derek's crew gathered around him, following his gaze to Marcus's feet. "Bro, those shoes are finished," one of them laughed. Then another, "How is he even walking in those? One more step and they're gonna fall off." The laughter spread. It wasn't contained to Derek's group anymore. It rippled through the hallway like a virus. Kids who didn't even know Marcus were laughing at him now. Some were pointing, some were taking pictures on their phones. Marcus felt his face burn. His hands trembled as he closed his locker. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to become invisible, to phase through the walls and escape this moment forever. But he couldn't. Instead, he had to walk past them, past Derek, past all of them. Every step felt like walking through fire. "Nice shoes, Chen," someone shouted as he passed. More laughter, louder now, meaner. It followed him down the hallway, echoing off the lockers, bouncing off the walls, embedding itself in his mind. By the time he reached his first period class, the entire school seemed to know about his shoes. In English class, Marcus sat in the back row, trying to focus on Mrs. Patterson's lecture about To Kill a Mockingbird. But he couldn't concentrate. All he could think about was his shoes. All he could feel was the phantom weight of 1,000 eyes still watching him. The girl next to him, Jessica, glanced down at his feet. For a moment, Marcus thought she was going to say something cruel. But instead, she just looked away, uncomfortable. That was almost worse than mockery. That was pity. By lunch, the nickname had already stuck. "Here comes Broken Shoes," someone called out as Marcus entered the cafeteria. A group of freshmen laughed. They didn't even know him. They were just repeating what they'd heard, participating in the collective mockery because it was fun, because it was easy, because Marcus was the target, and targets were meant to be hit. Marcus bought his lunch, a sad sandwich and an apple, and sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria. He didn't eat much. His stomach was twisted in knots. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through Instagram. There was already a photo of his shoes posted by someone he didn't even know. The caption read, "POV, you can't afford new shoes." It had 47 likes. Marcus felt something inside him crack. Not break, not yet, but crack, like a dam with the first sign of pressure. He closed the app and put his phone away. After school, Marcus sat on the steps outside Lincoln High, waiting for the bus. His shoes felt heavier than they had that morning. The mockery had added weight to them, had transformed them from mere objects into symbols of everything he lacked. Derek walked past with his crew, laughing about something. When he saw Marcus, he slowed down. "Yo, Chen," Derek called out. "You thinking about upgrading those kicks, or are you just gonna rock the thrift store special forever?" His friends laughed. Marcus didn't respond. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "That's what I thought," Derek said, shaking his head. "Dude's got no comeback. Dude's got nothing." They walked away, still laughing. And in that moment, something shifted inside Marcus. Something fundamental changed. He made a silent vow. "I will not let this break me." It wasn't a vow to get new shoes. It wasn't a vow to prove Derek wrong or to become popular or to fit in with the cool kids. It was deeper than that. It was a vow to refuse to accept their narrative, to refuse to believe that his worth was determined by the condition of his footwear, to refuse to break under the weight of their cruelty. But even as he made that vow, Marcus understood the terrible truth. It was going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done, because the mockery wasn't going to stop. If anything, it was just beginning, and he was going to have to survive it alone. What Marcus didn't know was that this single moment of mockery would become the catalyst for something extraordinary. But first, he would have to face an impossible choice that would force him to sacrifice everything. That night, Marcus sat in his room, staring at his shoes. They were placed neatly on the floor beside his bed, looking even more pathetic in the dim light of his desk lamp. His mother was working the night shift at the hospital. She wouldn't be home until 6 a.m. His younger sister, Emma, was already asleep in the room next door. The apartment was quiet in that way that only made everything louder in his head. Marcus picked up one of the shoes and turned it over in his hands. The sole was completely separated now, hanging by a thread of glue and hope. He could see the insole, worn smooth by 2 years of walking. He could see the imprint of his foot pressed into the material, a permanent record of every step he'd taken in these shoes. He thought about Derek's words. Dudes got nothing. Was that true? Did he have nothing? Marcus looked around his room. A twin bed with sheets that had been washed so many times they were paper thin. A desk he'd found on the curb 3 years ago. A bookshelf made from cinder blocks and wooden planks. Posters of athletes taped to the walls. Usain Bolt, Michael Jordan, Serena Williams. People who had started with nothings and become legends. His phone buzzed. A text from his best friend, Jamal. Jamal. "Yo, bro, you good? Heard about the shoe thing." Marcus stared at the message for a long time before responding. Marcus. "Yeah, I'm good." He wasn't good. But what else was he supposed to say? Jamal. "Derek's an idiot. Don't let that get to you." Easy for Jamal to say. Jamal had money. His parents owned a restaurant. Jamal wore new shoes every other month. Jamal had never been mocked for what he was wearing because what he wore always fit the standard. Marcus didn't respond. He set his phone down and went back to staring at his shoes. The truth was, Derek's words had hit because they contained a kernel of truth. Marcus did have nothing, or at least nothing that mattered in the world Derek inhabited. No money, no new clothes, no car waiting in the driveway, no family vacation planned for spring break. But there was something else, something Derek didn't have. Marcus had hunger, not the physical kind, though there were nights when his mother chose between buying groceries and paying the electric bill, and those nights taught him what real hunger felt like. But the other kind, the kind that burned in your chest and wouldn't let you sleep, the kind that whispered to you in the dark and said, "This is not where you're supposed to end up." Marcus stood up and walked to his window. He looked out at the neighborhood, the cracked sidewalks, the chain-link fences, the apartment buildings that all looked the same. He'd lived here his whole life. His mother had grown up here, her mother before her. It was a good neighborhood in some ways. There were good people here. But there was also a ceiling, an invisible limit that most people never tried to break through because they'd learned long ago that the glass was too thick. Marcus had always known he didn't want to stay here. But knowing and doing were two different things. He went back to his desk and opened his laptop. He pulled up YouTube and searched for something he'd been watching lately. Training videos, running techniques, sprinting form, conditioning workouts. He'd always been fast. Even in elementary school, he was the kid who won every race during gym class. In middle school, he'd joined the track team on a whim. Mostly because it was free, mostly because he had nothing else to do after school. By freshman year, he was one of the best sprinters in his school's history. But then sophomore year happened. His mother got sick. Not seriously, but seriously enough that she missed work. And missing work meant missing money. And missing money meant everything got harder. Marcus had quit the track team to pick up a job at a grocery store, stocking shelves for minimum wage. That was 2 years ago. He hadn't run competitively since. Marcus scrolled through the videos, watching athletes move with a grace and power that seemed almost superhuman. Usain Bolt exploding off the starting blocks, Allison Felix gliding down the straightaway, Trayvon Brommel launching himself forward like a rocket. They all had one thing in common. They moved like people who believed in themselves, like people who knew exactly where they were supposed to be. Marcus had forgotten what that felt like. He closed the laptop and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind was racing, caught between two impossible choices. Choice 1, accept the narrative. Accept that he was broken shoes. Accept that he was poor, that he was nothing, that the best he could hope for was a job like his mother's. Working night shifts, coming home exhausted, never quite getting ahead. This choice was safe. It was familiar. It was what everyone expected of him. Choice 2, refuse the narrative. Go back to running. Push himself harder than he'd ever pushed before. Try to become something more than what his circumstances were supposed to allow. This choice was terrifying. It meant sacrifice. It meant pain. It meant risking everything on the slim possibility that he might actually succeed. The problem was, choice 2 required something he didn't have. New shoes, not because of Derek or the mockery or what anyone thought, but because his current shoes were literally falling apart, and you couldn't run competitively in shoes that were disintegrating. And new shoes cost money. Money Marcus didn't have. He thought about his mother. She was working doubles now, trying to save up for Emma's school supplies. She was already giving him everything she had. He couldn't ask her for more. He thought about his job at the grocery store. A decent pair of running shoes cost at least $120. That meant 2 months of every penny from his paycheck going towards shoes. 2 months of sacrifice. 2 months of not being able to help his mother. 2 months of choosing himself over his family. Could he do that? Should he do that? Marcus sat up and looked at his shoes again. They were just objects. Pieces of leather and rubber and thread. but they represented something bigger. They represented the line between who he was and who he could become. He made a decision. He would do it. He would save the money. He would buy new shoes. He would go back to running. He would push himself harder than he'd ever pushed before. And he would do it not to prove Derek wrong, and not to show everyone at school that they were mistaken about him. He would do it because the alternative, accepting the ceiling, accepting the limit, accepting that this was all he was ever going to be, was worse than any amount of sacrifice. He would do it because he had nothing to lose, except the one thing he couldn't afford to lose: hope. Marcus picked up his phone and texted Jamal. "Marcus, I'm going back to track. I need your help." The response came almost immediately. "Jamal, say less. I'm in." Marcus looked at his broken shoes one more time. Then he set them aside and made a promise to himself. "These shoes will not define me. I will define myself." And with that promise, everything changed. Marcus started his new job the following Monday. It wasn't at the grocery store anymore. He'd given his 2 weeks' notice on Friday, and his manager, a tired-looking man named Robert who'd never paid much attention to him anyway, had simply nodded and said, "Okay." The new job was at a local running store called Velocity. It was a small shop tucked between a laundromat and a Chinese restaurant, owned by a man named Coach Williams. Marcus had walked past it 100 times, but never gone inside. Running stores were for people who could afford to run. But when Marcus walked in that Monday morning, something shifted. The store smelled like rubber and possibility. The walls were lined with shoes, hundreds of them, in every color imaginable. The floors were polished concrete. There were photos everywhere, athletes mid-stride, crossing finish lines, celebrating victories. And behind the counter stood Coach Williams, a man in his 60s with gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen a lot of life. "You're Marcus?" Coach Williams asked. Marcus nodded. He'd applied online, and somehow, miraculously, he'd gotten the job. "Good," Coach Williams said. "Welcome to Velocity. Here's how this works. You work 15 hours a week, minimum wage, plus a 40% employee discount on anything in the store. You interested?" Marcus had done the math in his head before even applying. With his current grocery store pay, that was still a month of saving. But with this job, at minimum wage for 15 hours a week, he could do it in 3 weeks. 3 weeks felt like forever, and like no time at all. "I'm interested," Marcus said. "Good," Coach Williams repeated. He pulled out a shirt with the Velocity logo on it. "You start now. Come on, I'll show you around." For the next 3 hours, Coach Williams taught Marcus everything about running shoes. He explained pronation and arch support. He showed him how to identify different types of runners by their gait. He talked about cushioning and responsiveness and the importance of proper fit. But more than that, he told stories. Stories about runners he'd coached over the years. Stories about kids who came into his store with nothing and left with everything. Stories about the power of believing in yourself when nobody else does. "You know what the difference is between the kids who make it and the kids who don't?" Coach Williams asked as they were closing up that evening. Marcus shook his head. "It's not talent," Coach Williams said. "I've seen talented kids quit because they got tired or discouraged. It's not money either. I've seen poor kids become champions and rich kids become nothing. The difference is hunger. Real hunger. The kind that doesn't let you sleep at night. The kind that makes you willing to sacrifice everything." He looked at Marcus directly. "You got that kind of hunger, kid?" Marcus thought about his broken shoes. He thought about Derek's laughter. He thought about the choice he'd made in his room that night. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. I think I do. Coach Williams smiled. Then you're going to do something special. I can feel it. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus fell into a rhythm. He worked at Velocity from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays. He went to school from 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. In the mornings before school, he woke up at 5:30 and did bodyweight exercises in his room. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats, lunges. He was rebuilding his base fitness, preparing his body for what was coming. Every dollar he earned went into a jar hidden under his bed. He watched the money accumulate with an almost religious fervor. 50-50, 50, 100, a 150. Each dollar was a vote for his future. His mother noticed the change in him. "You seem different," she said one morning, watching him do push-ups in the kitchen before school. "I'm going back to running," Marcus said, breathless between repetitions. Competitively. She set down her coffee mug. She'd just gotten home from her night shift, and exhaustion was written all over her face. But there was something else there, too. Hope. "Marcus, that's wonderful," she said. "But don't overdo it. I need you healthy." "I will," he promised. What he didn't tell her was that he was already doing too much. His body ached constantly. His legs were sore. His shoulders burned. But he pushed through it because the pain meant progress. The pain meant he was changing. At school, things were different now, too. Derek and his crew still made jokes about Marcus's shoes. But something had shifted in how Marcus received those jokes. They didn't land the same way anymore. It was like he'd built a wall around himself, not a wall of anger or defensiveness, but a wall of purpose. The jokes bounced off that wall and fell to the ground, powerless. Jamal noticed the change immediately. "Yo, what happened to you?" Jamal asked one day at lunch. "You're like different, more focused or something." "I'm going to try out for the track team," Marcus said. "Next month, when the spring season starts." Jamal's eyes widened. "For real? Bro, you haven't trained in 2 years." "I know," Marcus said, "but I'm training now." He didn't tell Jamal about the shoes. He didn't tell anyone. It felt like a secret, something sacred that would lose its power if he spoke it out loud. On day 21, Marcus reached $360 in his jar. It was more than enough. That Saturday, he walked into Velocity after his shift ended at 5 p.m. Coach Williams was closing up, counting the register. "Coach," Marcus said, "I want to buy shoes." Coach Williams looked up. He seemed to understand immediately what this meant. "Come on," he said, setting down the register. "Let's find you the right pair." For the next hour, Coach Williams fitted Marcus for running shoes like it was a sacred ritual. He measured his feet. He watched him walk and run on the treadmill in the store. He asked questions about his goals, his training, his dreams. Finally, he pulled a pair of shoes from the wall, sleek, black and silver, with a design that looked like it was built for speed. "These," Coach Williams said, "these are for someone who's about to do something special." Marcus put them on. They felt like they'd been made specifically for his feet. They felt like possibility. They felt like the future. "How much?" Marcus asked. "With your discount?" Coach Williams smiled. $72. Marcus pulled out his jar of money and counted out the bills. His hands were shaking slightly as he handed them over. Coach Williams took the money and put it in the register. Then he looked at Marcus seriously. "These shoes are going to carry you places," he said. "But only if you're willing to run. Only if you're willing to push when it hurts. Only if you're willing to believe in yourself when nobody else does. You understand?" Marcus looked down at his new shoes. They were perfect. They were everything. I understand, he said. Good, Coach Williams said. He put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Because starting tomorrow, I'm coaching you, free. You're going to train with me 3 days a week. And when the spring season starts, you're going to walk onto that track team and show them what hungry looks like. Marcus felt something break open inside his chest. Not break in a bad way. Break like a dam breaking, like water finally being released. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, Coach Williams said. Just run. That night, Marcus wore his new shoes to bed. He fell asleep with them on, feeling like he'd finally stepped into the life he was meant to live. The mockery wasn't over. Derek and his friends would continue to laugh, continue to try to pull him down. But Marcus had discovered something more powerful than their cruelty. He had discovered his own power. And with every step in his new shoes, that power was growing. The first week of training with Coach Williams was brutal. Marcus showed up at Velocity on Tuesday evening after school, still wearing his uniform from the grocery store shift he'd picked up for extra hours. Coach Williams took one look at him and shook his head. You're working too much, he said. I need the money, Marcus replied. You need to run more, Coach Williams countered. There's a balance. Right now, you're tipping toward burnout. Trust me, I've seen it 100 times. Kids with hunger like yours, they burn bright and fast. Then they burn out. But Marcus had already committed to the extra shifts. He needed to help his mother. She'd been struggling more lately, picking up extra shifts herself, and he couldn't just abandon her now that he'd found his path. I can handle it, Marcus said. Coach Williams studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but we're going to be smart about this. Come on. They walked out to the track behind Lincoln High School. It was a cool evening in early March, the kind of evening where the air felt clean and full of possibility. The track was empty except for a few joggers doing their evening runs. Before we do anything, Coach Williams said, I need to understand where you're starting from. Show me what you've got. Marcus took off his jacket and stretched quickly. He'd been doing some light training on his own, running a few miles here and there, doing bodyweight exercises. But nothing serious, nothing structured. Run a 400 for me, Coach Williams said. Full speed. I want to see your form, your pace, everything. Marcus took his position at the starting line that Coach Williams marked out. His new shoes felt perfect beneath his feet. He could feel the cushioning, the responsiveness, the way they seemed to propel him forward. Go, Coach Williams said. Marcus exploded forward. For the first 100 meters, it felt amazing. His legs felt strong. His breathing was controlled. He was fast, faster than he'd been in years. But by 200 meters, his body started to rebel. His lungs burned. His legs felt heavy. The 2 years of not training seriously had taken their toll. He crossed 400 meters in 67 seconds. It was slow. For a competitive sprinter, it was embarrassingly slow. But it was a starting point. Coach Williams was waiting for him at the finish line, clipboard in hand, making notes. Okay, he said as Marcus bent over, hands on his knees, breathing hard. That tells me everything I need to know. Your cardiovascular fitness is low, but your natural speed is still there. I can see it in your stride. You've got the foundation. We just need to rebuild it. Over the next hour, Coach Williams put Marcus through a training session that left him utterly destroyed. They did dynamic stretches. They did form drills, high knees, butt kicks, bounding exercises that felt awkward and unnatural. They did short sprints with long recovery periods. They worked on his starting position, his acceleration, his drive phase. By the end, Marcus could barely walk. "This is just the beginning," Coach Williams said as they walked back to Velocity. "Tomorrow you rest. Thursday we do it again. And we keep doing this 3 days a week, and we slowly build you back up. In 6 weeks, when the spring season starts, you're going to be ready." "6 weeks?" Marcus asked. "That's not much time." "It's enough," Coach Williams said, "if you're willing to do the work." Marcus was willing. The next 3 weeks became a blur of work, school, and training. His schedule was insane. It was relentless. There was no time for fun, no time for friends, no time for anything except the narrow path he'd set himself on. But something incredible was happening. His body was transforming. The soreness that had plagued him in the first week started to fade as his muscles adapted to the training. His legs became more defined. His chest became broader. His time started to improve, not dramatically, but noticeably. By week 3, he was running 400 meters in 63 seconds. By week 4, it was 60 seconds. More importantly, his mind was changing. Marcus had always been smart. He got decent grades without trying too hard. But now he was learning something different. He was learning discipline. He was learning what it meant to push past pain. He was learning that the voice in your head that says, "Stop, you can't do this," is a liar. At school, things were shifting too. Derek and his crew had moved on to other targets. The mockery about his shoes had faded into the background noise of high school life. But more than that, Marcus was starting to get noticed for different reasons. In PE class, when they ran the mile, Marcus finished first, not by a little, by a lot. The PE teacher, Mr. Harrison, pulled him aside afterward. "You're fast," Mr. Harrison said. "Have you thought about joining the track team?" "I'm planning to," Marcus said. "Good," Mr. Harrison said. "You've got real potential. Don't waste it." Word started to spread. By the time spring break rolled around in week 5, people were talking about Marcus Chen, not as broken shoes anymore, but as the kid who was fast, the kid who was training hard, the kid who had something special. Even Jamal noticed the change. "Bro, you're built different now," Jamal said one day at lunch, watching Marcus eat his meal with single-minded focus. "Like, literally. You've got muscles now." Marcus shrugged. He didn't think about his body in terms of how it looked. He thought about it in terms of what it could do. Every muscle was a tool. Every ounce of strength was fuel for speed. But the transformation wasn't just physical. One afternoon in week 5, Marcus was at Velocity restocking shoes when a kid came in. He looked like he was maybe 13 or 14, and he was wearing shoes that were falling apart. The sole was separated. The laces were frayed. They were Marcus's shoes from 6 weeks ago. The kid was looking at the running shoes on the wall, clearly wanting them, but clearly unable to afford them. Marcus recognized that look. He'd worn that look. "Can I help you find something?" Marcus asked, approaching the kid. "Just looking," the kid said quickly, like he was afraid Marcus would kick him out. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "David," the kid said. "Okay, David. I'm Marcus. What brings you to Velocity?" David hesitated, then said quietly, "I want to run, but I can't afford good shoes." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He thought about Coach Williams. He thought about the moment when Coach Williams had decided to coach him for free. He thought about how different his life would be if someone hadn't believed in him. "Come here," Marcus said. "Let me show you something." For the next hour, Marcus did exactly what Coach Williams had done for him. He measured David's feet. He asked about his running goals. He found him a pair of shoes that were on sale, still expensive, but better than full price. David's face fell. I don't have that much. Marcus thought for a moment. Then he made a decision. Tell you what, he said. We'll hold the shoes for you. Really? David asked, like he couldn't believe someone would do that for him. Really, Marcus said. And when you get the shoes, you're going to need training. You know Coach Williams? David shook his head. Well, you're about to meet him, and he's going to help you become a runner. Because that's what we do here. We help people run. When Coach Williams came out from the back of the store, Marcus explained the situation. Coach Williams looked at Marcus for a long moment, and Marcus could see something like pride in his eyes. Good man, Coach Williams said to Marcus. Then to David, you've got a deal. And when you get those shoes, you come find me. We'll get you trained up. That night, Marcus thought about how far he'd come. 6 weeks ago, he was the kid with broken shoes, the kid everyone laughed at. Now he was the kid helping other kids find their way. The mockery had transformed into meaning. But the real test was still coming. The spring track season was starting in 1 week. And Marcus was about to discover whether all this training, all this sacrifice, all this hunger had been worth it. He lay in bed wearing his running shoes, just like he had that first night after buying them. But now they weren't symbols of hope. They were tools, instruments of transformation, weapons of ambition. And tomorrow he would sharpen them. The day of the first track meet arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, mild temperature, a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper encouragement. Marcus stood in the bleachers of Lincoln High School's track, watching the other schools' athletes warm up. There were maybe 8 schools competing today, and the athletes looked intimidating. They had matching uniforms, professional-looking gear, the kind of confidence that came from years of training. Marcus had been training for 6 weeks. He was wearing a borrowed uniform from the school's athletic department. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was clean and it had the Lincoln High colors. His new shoes gleamed in the sunlight. Coach Williams was somewhere in the stands, watching. You good? Jamal asked, appearing beside him with 2 cups of water. He'd come to support Marcus, which meant the world. Nervous, Marcus admitted. You should be, Jamal said. You're about to run against kids who've been training all season. Thanks for the pep talk, Marcus said dryly. I'm serious, though, Jamal continued. But here's the thing, I've watched you train. I've seen what you can do. You're different, man. You're like hungry in a way these other kids aren't. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd felt it too. In every training session, in every sprint, in every moment when his body wanted to quit, but his mind pushed through. There was something burning inside him that these other kids, with their comfortable lives and their new shoes and their parents' support, didn't have. At least, that's what he told himself. First call for 400 meters, a voice announced over the loudspeaker. Marcus's stomach dropped. The 400 meters was his event. It was the distance that suited his body type and his training. Coach Williams had been preparing him specifically for this race. That's you, Jamal said, squeezing his shoulder. Go show them what you've got. Marcus made his way down to the track. There were 6 other runners in his heat. They all looked fast. They all looked confident. One kid in particular, a tall, lean runner with expensive-looking gear, looked like he'd been born running. The starter called them to their marks. Marcus took his position in lane 4. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel his legs trembling slightly with adrenaline. This is it, he thought. This is what you've been working for. Set, the starter said. Marcus leaned forward, finding his balance point. He thought about all the training sessions with Coach Williams. He thought about the form drills. He thought about the sprints. He thought about the pain and the sacrifice and the hunger. He thought about his broken shoes and the kid named David and the promise he'd made to himself that night in his room. The gun fired. Marcus exploded forward. For the first 100 meters, he was right there with the tall kid in lane 5. They were neck and neck, both moving with explosive power. The crowd was already cheering, sensing that this was going to be a good race. But by 200 meters, Marcus felt something shifting. His legs felt heavy. His breathing was becoming labored. The tall kid was pulling ahead. No, Marcus thought. Not like this. He dug deeper. He thought about Coach Williams' voice. When it hurts, that's when you push harder. That's when the real race begins. By 300 meters, Marcus had closed the gap. He was right behind the tall kid again. The other runners were falling back. This was becoming a two-person race. The final 100 meters were a blur of pain and determination. Marcus's lungs screamed. His legs felt like they were made of concrete. But his mind was clear. His focus was absolute. He thought about his mother working night shifts. He thought about Emma's school supplies. He thought about Coach Williams believing in him. He thought about David with his broken shoes. He thought about Derek's laughter and the mockery and the moment when he decided that none of it would define him. With 50 meters to go, Marcus made his move. It wasn't a dramatic surge. It was a steady, relentless push, a deepening of his commitment to the race. He pulled even with the tall kid. Then he pulled ahead. The finish line approached. Marcus crossed it first, his arms pumping, his lungs heaving, his body completely spent. He'd done it. The time came back, 58.3 seconds. It wasn't a record. It wasn't even that fast by competitive standards. But it was fast enough to win. And more importantly, it was a massive improvement from his 67-second time 6 weeks ago. As Marcus walked off the track, trying to catch his breath, he saw Coach Williams making his way down from the stands. The older man was grinning widely. "That's what I'm talking about," Coach Williams said, grabbing Marcus in a bear hug. "That's what hunger looks like." "I won," Marcus said, still not quite believing it. "You did more than win," Coach Williams said. "You showed them something. You showed them that it doesn't matter where you started from. It matters where you're going." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus ran in 2 more events. The 200 meters, which he placed second in, and the 4x400 relay, which his team won. By the end of the day, Lincoln High had accumulated enough points to place third overall in the meet. But Marcus had placed first or second in every event he ran. Walking back to the stands, he saw his mother. He hadn't known she was coming. She was supposed to be sleeping before her night shift at the hospital. But there she was, standing in the bleachers with tears streaming down her face. "Mom?" Marcus asked, confused. "I wouldn't miss this," she said, pulling him into a hug. "I got someone to cover my shift. I wanted to see you run." Marcus felt something break open in his chest again. All the sacrifice, all the work, all the hunger. It suddenly felt worth it. "How long were you here?" he asked. "Since the beginning," she said. "I saw all 3 races. And Marcus, you were incredible. I've never seen you run like that." "I've never run like that," Marcus admitted. That evening, at Velocity, Coach Williams called a small celebration. He'd closed the store early and ordered pizza. Marcus, his mother, Jamal, David, who'd come back with his first $30 payment, and Coach Williams sat around eating and talking. "You know what the beautiful thing about today was?" Coach Williams said, looking at Marcus. "It wasn't that you won. It was that you showed something to yourself. You showed yourself that you're capable of more than you thought." "I still have a lot to learn," Marcus said. "Of course you do," Coach Williams agreed. "But that's the fun part. That's where the growth happens. You think I became a coach overnight? I was a runner once, not a great one. I was decent, but I wasn't special. I never made it to college on a scholarship or anything like that. But I learned something from running that changed my life." "What's that?" Marcus asked. "That the only person who can limit you is you," Coach Williams said. "And once you understand that, once you really believe it, you become unstoppable." Marcus thought about that as he drove home with his mother that night. They were listening to the radio, and his mother was singing along to an old song, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace of acceptance or resignation, but the peace of knowing that he was on the right path. The peace of knowing that all the sacrifice was leading somewhere. Over the next month, Marcus competed in 5 more meets. He didn't win every race. There were faster runners out there, kids who'd been training longer, kids with better genetics, kids with more resources. But Marcus was consistently placing in the top 3. His times kept improving. By mid-April, he'd run a 57.8 in the 400 meters, a personal best. More importantly, he was becoming known. Not as Broken Shoes anymore, but as Marcus Chen, the kid who'd come out of nowhere and was running incredible times. The kid who had something special. But with success came new challenges. Derek approached him one day in the hallway. "Hey," Derek said, and his tone was different now. Not mocking, not cruel, just curious. "That was impressive at the meet last weekend." Marcus was cautious. "Thanks." "I was thinking," Derek continued, "maybe I should try out for track too. I'm pretty fast." Marcus studied Derek for a moment. He could see what was happening. Derek had seen Marcus succeed, and now he wanted some of that success for himself. The mockery had turned into envy. "You should," Marcus said finally. "But here's the thing. It's not about being fast. It's about being willing to work harder than you've ever worked before. It's about pushing past the pain. It's about sacrifice. If you're not willing to do that, you won't make it." Derek nodded slowly, like he was absorbing this information. "I think I can do that," he said. Marcus didn't know if Derek would actually follow through. But he'd learned something important. Everyone had the capacity to change. Everyone had the capacity to do better. The question was whether they were willing to pay the price. That night, Marcus was at Velocity, helping Coach Williams close up the store. David had now saved enough money for his shoes and had been training with Coach Williams for 3 weeks. The kid was slow, but he was improving. And more importantly, he had the hunger. "You know what I'm proud of?" Coach Williams said as they were wiping down the counters. "It's not just that you're fast. It's that you're bringing other people up with you. You're showing David that it's possible. You're showing Jamal that friendship means showing up. You're showing your mother that sacrifice is worth it. That's the real measure of success, kid. Not the medals or the times, but the people you inspire along the way." Marcus thought about that as he walked home that night, his new shoes carrying him through the familiar streets of his neighborhood. The streets looked different now, not because they'd changed, but because he had changed. He was no longer a kid defined by his circumstances. He was a kid defined by his choices, and every choice he made was propelling him forward. By late April, Marcus had become a fixture at Lincoln High's track meets. His name appeared regularly in the local sports section of the newspaper. Local runner shows promise. One headline read, "Chen breaks school record in 400 meters," another proclaimed. The attention was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Teachers started recognizing him in the hallways. Students who'd never spoken to him before now wanted to be his friend. Girls who'd previously ignored him now smiled when they passed. The social currency of high school had shifted, and Marcus found himself suddenly wealthy in a way he'd never been before. But with the attention came pressure. Immense, suffocating pressure that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Coach Williams noticed it first during a Tuesday afternoon training session in early May. Marcus was working on his 400-meter repeats, a key part of his training regimen. Normally, these sessions were where Marcus thrived, where he pushed himself to new limits and felt the exhilaration of improvement. But today was different. "You're tight," Coach Williams called out as Marcus finished his third repeat. "Your shoulders are tense. Your stride is shorter. You're not running free anymore. You're running scared." Marcus stopped, breathing heavily, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "I'm not scared," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. The tremor in his voice betrayed him. Coach Williams jogged over to where Marcus stood and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Yes, you are," he said matter-of-factly. "And I know why. You've tasted success, and now you're afraid of losing it. That's natural. It's human. But it's also poison. Fear makes you tight. Fear makes you slow. Fear makes you forget why you started running in the first place." They sat down on the bleachers, the evening sun casting long shadows across the track. In the distance, Marcus could hear the sounds of the city. Traffic, sirens, a helicopter passing overhead. The normal rhythm of life continuing on, indifferently to his internal struggle. A group of younger students were doing warm-up laps on the far side of the track, their voices carrying across the field. "Why did I start running?" Marcus asked, genuinely uncertain of the answer anymore. The question that had seemed so clear 6 months ago now felt murky and complicated. "Because you wanted to prove something," Coach Williams said thoughtfully, his eyes fixed on the track ahead of them. "To yourself, primarily. But also to everyone who doubted you. To everyone who laughed at your shoes. To everyone who thought you were just another poor kid from a broken neighborhood who'd never amount to anything. You wanted to prove that their assumptions were wrong." Marcus nodded slowly. That had been true in the beginning. The hunger had been pure and uncomplicated then. "And now?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now you're trying to prove something different," Coach Williams said, turning to look at him directly. "You're trying to prove that you're worthy of all this attention, that you deserve to be successful, that you're not going to let anyone down, and that's a heavier weight to carry than the first one. Because the first weight was about proving something to others. This weight is about proving something to yourself." Marcus felt tears threatening to spill over. He'd been holding so much in, the pressure, the expectations, the fear that it would all somehow disappear like a dream when he woke up. The fear that he'd been lucky so far, but that luck would eventually run out. "What if I'm not good enough?" Marcus asked quietly. The question that had been haunting him for weeks, finally escaping his lips. "What if I peak now? What if this is as good as I get? What if everyone realizes I'm just a flash in the pan, a kid who got lucky for a few months?" Coach Williams was quiet for a long moment. A breeze swept across the track, carrying with it the smell of cut grass and the faint sound of traffic from the nearby highway. Then you'll have accomplished something incredible, Coach Williams said finally. You went from not training at all to being one of the fastest runners in the county in 6 months. That's extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Most people never accomplish anything close to what you've already done. But more importantly, you'll have learned something that most people never learn in their entire lives. That your worth isn't determined by your achievements. You're worthy because you exist. Everything else, the medals, the records, the attention, is just bonus. It's decoration on a life that already has value. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the younger students continue their laps. Marcus thought about what Coach Williams had said. He thought about his mother, who'd never once made his love conditional on his performance. He thought about David, who looked up to him not because he was fast, but because he'd shown kindness. He thought about Jamal, who'd been his friend long before Marcus became a track star. "Come on," Coach Williams said finally, standing up and stretching. "Let's do some light work. No pressure, no times, no comparing yourself to anyone else. Just you and the track. Remember what it felt like when you first started? When you were just happy to be running? When it was pure joy and not obligation? They did an easy 800 meters. Just a steady jog, nothing fast, nothing competitive. Coach Williams ran alongside him, setting a comfortable pace. As Marcus settled into the rhythm of his breathing and the steady impact of his feet on the track, something began to shift inside him. The tension in his shoulders eased. His stride lengthened naturally. He felt his body relax. Somewhere in that run, Marcus felt the tension start to ease. He felt the joy start to return, not the desperate, achievement-driven joy of winning, but the simple, uncomplicated joy of movement. The joy of his body doing what it was built to do. The joy of feeling strong and capable. But the pressure didn't disappear. It only intensified as the season progressed and the county championships approached. In the second week of May, the county championships were announced. It was the biggest meet of the season. Schools from across the entire county would be competing. The winner of each event would be crowned county champion. It was the kind of achievement that could define a high school career, the kind of credential that colleges looked at when considering athletic scholarships. And everyone expected Marcus to win. "You've got this," Jamal said at lunch one day, with absolute certainty in his voice. He was sitting across from Marcus in the cafeteria, a sandwich in one hand and a chocolate milk in the other. "I'm telling you, man, you're going to destroy the competition. No one in this county is running faster than you right now." "You don't know that," Marcus said, picking at his food without much appetite. "I know you," Jamal said, "and I know what you're capable of. Trust me." Later that day, another student, someone Marcus barely knew, a girl named Ashley who sat behind him in English class, approached him in the hallway. "You're going to be county champion, right?" she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "That's going to be so cool. You're going to be like famous." A boy from his physics class stopped him after school. "Yo, Chen, you're going to crush it at counties, right? I'm putting money on you." Even teachers started making comments. His history teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, pulled him aside after class. "Marcus, I heard you're competing at the county championships. That's fantastic. You should be really proud of yourself. I expect you'll do great things." The expectations became suffocating. They wrapped around Marcus like vines, tightening with each passing day. Everyone had already decided what the outcome should be. Everyone had already written the story. Marcus was supposed to win. Marcus was supposed to be the champion. Anything less would be a disappointment. And Marcus felt the weight of those expectations pressing down on him, crushing him under the burden of other people's certainty. Marcus found himself unable to sleep the night before the meet. He lay in bed in the small room he shared with his younger cousin, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios like a runaway train he couldn't stop. What if he choked? What if there was a runner he hadn't faced yet who was faster, stronger, more talented? What if all of this, the training, the sacrifice, the hunger, the early mornings and the pain and the pushing through when his body wanted to quit, turned out to be for nothing? What if he failed in front of the entire county, in front of all those people who believed in him, in front of Coach Williams who'd invested so much time in him? The thoughts spiraled endlessly, each one darker and more catastrophic than the last. At 3 a.m., unable to bear the silence and his own thoughts any longer, he got out of bed quietly so as not to wake his cousin, and went to the kitchen. His mother was there, as he'd somehow known she would be, preparing for her night shift at the hospital. She was dressed in her scrubs, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, a thermos of coffee sitting on the counter beside her. She took one look at him and knew something was wrong. Her mother's intuition, honed by years of watching over her children and her patients, immediately recognized the signs of anxiety and stress. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently, setting down the sandwich she'd been preparing and turning her full attention to him. "Big meet tomorrow," Marcus said, sitting down at the kitchen table. He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd developed over the past few weeks. His mother poured him a glass of milk, cold, fresh milk from the refrigerator, and sat down at the table with him. She reached across and gently smoothed down his hair, a gesture so tender and so maternal that it nearly broke him. "You know what I've learned, working in the hospital?" she said, her voice soft but steady. "I've learned that the people who are most afraid are usually the people who care the most. They care about doing well. They care about not letting people down. They care about their own expectations of themselves. And that fear is actually a sign of how much they value what they're doing. It's a sign of how much this matters to you." "But what if I fail?" Marcus asked, voicing the fear that had been eating at him for days. "What if I go out there tomorrow and I'm not fast enough? What if everyone sees that I'm just a regular kid, not special at all?" "Then you fail," his mother said simply, without judgment or pity. "And you get up the next day and you try again. That's all any of us can do. That's all anyone has ever been able to do. Failure is not the end of the story. It's just a chapter in the middle." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her grip warm and reassuring. "I'm proud of you," she said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute sincerity. "Not because of your times or your medals or your records. I'm proud of you because of who you've become. You're disciplined. You're focused. You're kind to people like David who need help. You're not letting success make you arrogant or mean-spirited. You still remember where you came from. You still remember what it felt like to be the kid with broken shoes. That's what matters. That's what will matter long after the medals are forgotten." Marcus felt tears spill down his cheeks. His mother reached over and wiped them away with her thumb, the same way she had when he was a small child. "Get some sleep," she said. "And remember, I love you no matter what happens tomorrow. Your worth is not determined by a race. You are enough, exactly as you are, right now, in this moment." After his mother left for her shift, Marcus sat alone in the kitchen for a while longer, sipping his milk and thinking about what she'd said. Slowly, gradually, His anxiety began to ease. Not disappear completely. It was still there, a low hum of nervous energy. But it became manageable. It became something he could work with, rather than something that controlled him. He went back to bed and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The county championships were held at Central High School, a larger school in the more affluent part of the county, with a newer track and better facilities. The facility was impressive. Professional-grade equipment, a large grandstand that could seat several hundred people, timing equipment that looked like something from an Olympic stadium. The kind of setup that made it feel like a real competition, not just a high school meet. Marcus arrived early with Coach Williams in the coach's old truck. They drove through neighborhoods that gradually became more upscale, with larger houses and better maintained yards. Marcus watched the landscape change, aware of the socioeconomic gradient they were crossing. At the facility, they went through their normal warm-up routine, dynamic stretches that Coach Williams had taught him, form drills where they focused on proper running mechanics, some easy running to get the blood flowing and prepare his body for the work ahead. But Marcus's mind kept drifting. He kept scanning the other runners who were arriving, trying to identify who might be faster than him, cataloging their builds and their movements and their apparent confidence levels. There was a girl from Riverside High who had an incredible reputation. She'd been running competitively since middle school and had already verbally committed to a Division I university. There was a kid from Central High who looked like he could be a college athlete already, with the kind of physique and bearing that suggested years of serious training. There were several other runners who all looked confident and capable. Runners who'd clearly been training hard all season. Marcus felt his anxiety spike again. What was he doing here? These were serious athletes. These were kids who'd been training since they were young. What made him think he could compete with them? A coach. Williams found him sitting alone in the stands about 30 minutes before his race, staring at nothing in particular. "Talk to me," Coach Williams said, sitting down beside him on the hard metal bleachers. "I'm scared," Marcus admitted, not bothering to pretend otherwise. "I'm really scared. Look at these kids, Coach. They're all so fast. They all look so confident." "I know," Coach Williams said. "But here's what I want you to remember. You've already won. You've already accomplished something incredible. 6 months ago, you were a kid with broken shoes who'd never trained a day in his life. Now you're a county-level competitor. That's a victory no matter what happens today. That's an achievement that no one can take away from you." "But everyone expects me to win," Marcus said, his voice tight with anxiety. "If I don't win, I'll be letting everyone down. I'll be letting you down. I'll be letting my mom down. I'll be letting myself down." Coach Williams turned to face him directly, his weathered face serious and focused. "Everyone except the one person whose expectations matter most," Coach Williams said. "Who's that?" Marcus asked. "You," Coach Williams said. "And I think, deep down, you know that you're good enough. You know that you put in the work. You know that you belong here. You've earned your place at this meet through hard work and dedication and sacrifice. So the question isn't whether you can win. The question is whether you can trust yourself. Can you trust that your body has been trained properly? Can you trust that your mind is strong enough? Can you trust that you have what it takes?" Marcus took a deep breath, drawing the cool spring air into his lungs. He thought about his mother, who'd given up so much for him, and his sister. He thought about David, who looked up to him and believed in him. He thought about Jamal, who'd been his friend through everything. He thought about the night he'd made his choice in his room, when he decided that his circumstances didn't have to define his future. He thought about all the early mornings and the pain and the sacrifice and the hunger that had driven him forward. "I trust myself," he said quietly. And as he said it, he felt something shift inside him. The fear didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else, into focus, into clarity, into purpose. "Then go show them what you've got," Coach Williams said, squeezing his shoulder firmly. "Run your race, not their race, not everyone else's expectations, your race." The call came for the 400 meters. Marcus made his way down to the track, his legs feeling slightly heavy with nerves, but also energized with adrenaline. There were 8 runners in his heat, and they all looked fast, really fast. The girl from Riverside was in lane 2. The kid from Central was in lane 5. The other runners filled out the remaining lanes, each one looking confident and prepared. Marcus took his position in lane 3. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo through his entire body. He could feel the weight of expectations pressing down on him. From the crowd, from Coach Williams, from his mother who'd taken time off work to be here, from everyone who told him he was going to win. Then he thought about something Coach Williams had said during one of their training sessions. "Run your race, not their race. Control what you can control. Your effort, your form, your mental focus. That's all you have power over. Everything else is just noise." The starter called them to their marks. Marcus leaned forward into his starting position. He thought about his form, shoulders relaxed, arms at the right angle, weight balanced on the balls of his feet. He thought about his breathing and how he needed to maintain a steady rhythm throughout the race. He thought about his strategy: conserve energy in the first 200 meters, make his move in the third 100, and then empty the tank in the final stretch. "Set," the starter said, and the runners rose slightly, finding their balance points, preparing for the explosive movement to come. Marcus found his balance point. He was calm now. The fear had transformed into focus. His mind was clear. His purpose was clear. He was ready. The gun fired, and Marcus ran. For the first 100 meters, he was in the middle of the pack, running steady and controlled. The girl from Riverside had taken the early lead, her powerful stride eating up the ground. The kid from Central was right behind her, running smooth and efficient. Marcus was in 4th place, running steady, saving his energy, trusting his training and his strategy. By 200 meters, Marcus had moved to 3rd place. The pace was fast, faster than any race he'd run before. His lungs were already beginning to burn, his legs were heavy, but he was controlled. He was patient. He was executing his race plan. At 300 meters, something shifted inside Marcus. He could feel it happening, a mental switch flipping, a surge of determination, a deepening of his commitment to the race. This was the moment. This was where champions were made or lost. Marcus made his move. He passed the kid from Central with a smooth acceleration, his body responding to his mental command. He passed the girl from Riverside with a burst of speed that surprised even him. He took the lead with 100 meters to go, his body suddenly feeling light and powerful despite the fatigue that was screaming through his muscles. The final stretch was pure pain and pure will. Marcus's body was screaming at him to slow down, to ease off, to accept a 2nd or 3rd place finish. His lungs felt like they were on fire. His legs felt like concrete. Every system in his body was telling him to stop. But his mind was stronger. It had been strengthened through 6 months of training, through pushing through pain, through choosing discipline over comfort. He thought about his mother working night shifts at the hospital. He thought about Coach Williams believing in him when no one else did. He thought about the kid with broken shoes who'd made a choice 6 months ago to become something more. He thought about David and Jamal and everyone who'd supported him. He thought about the hunger that had started this whole journey. And with those thoughts driving him forward, Marcus pushed harder. He dug deeper. He found reserves of strength and willpower he didn't know he had. He crossed the finish line first, his arms pumping, his lungs heaving, his body completely spent, but his spirit soaring. The time came back, 56.9 seconds. It was a personal best. It was a county record for his age group. It was the fastest time of the day across all heats. It was a victory that no one could dispute. Marcus had won. As Marcus walked off the track on shaking legs, completely spent, drenched in sweat, he saw Coach Williams rushing down from the stands. The older man was beaming with pride, his face flushed with excitement. "That's what I'm talking about," Coach Williams shouted, grabbing him in a bear hug that nearly knocked the wind out of him. "That's what happens when you trust yourself. That's what happens when you run your race and not anyone else's." Other competitors congratulated him as he walked through the warm-down area. The girl from Riverside shook his hand and told him he'd run an incredible race. The kid from Central nodded in respect. Coaches from other schools approached him, asking about his training, expressing interest in his future. But as Marcus accepted congratulations and basked in the glow of victory, he realized something important. The victory felt good, genuinely good, but it didn't feel the way he'd expected it to feel. It didn't feel like the culmination of everything, like the final destination he'd been working toward. It felt like a beginning rather than an ending. It felt like a milestone on a much longer journey. Because now the real pressure would start. Now everyone would expect him to keep winning. Now the expectations would only grow heavier. Now colleges would be watching. Now his future would start to take shape based on the decisions he made and the performances he delivered. That evening, at the celebration dinner, his mother insisted on taking him to a nice restaurant that was a splurge for their family budget. Marcus sat quietly, thinking about what came next. He was only a junior. He had one more year of high school left. He had college to think about. He had a future to build that extended far beyond this one race, this one county championship. The victory today was important, genuinely important, but it was just one step on a much longer journey. It was one chapter in a story that was still being written. "You okay?" his mother asked, noticing his quiet demeanor. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "You seem far away." "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm just thinking about what's next." His mother smiled, understanding immediately what he meant. "That's good," she said. "That means you're growing. You're not satisfied with just winning today. You're not resting on your laurels. You're thinking about tomorrow. You're thinking about the future. That's the mark of someone who's going to do great things." "Is it healthy, though?" Marcus asked. "Or is it just anxiety? Am I ever going to be able to just enjoy a victory?" "Yes," his mother said, "but not yet. Right now, you're in the phase where you're building something. You're establishing yourself. You're proving to yourself and to the world what you're capable of. That requires constant forward momentum. There will be time to rest and enjoy later. For now, the work continues." That night, after they got home, Marcus put on his running shoes and went for a run through his neighborhood. It was a cool evening, and the streets were quiet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. As he ran, his body still tired from the day's exertion, but his mind needing the clarity that running provided, He thought about everything that had changed in 6 months. He thought about the kid with broken shoes who'd stood in front of the mirror and made a choice. He thought about the hunger that had driven him forward through pain and doubt and fear. He thought about Coach Williams and David and Jamal and his mother, all the people who'd believed in him and supported him. He thought about how far he'd come and how far he still had to go. And with each step, each breath, each beat of his heart, Marcus felt the weight of expectations transforming into something else. Not fear, not anxiety, not the crushing burden of other people's certainty about what he should accomplish, but purpose. Clear, undeniable, burning purpose. A sense of direction and destiny that was uniquely his own. A knowledge that he was capable of more than he'd ever imagined, and a determination to discover exactly what his limits were. He was just getting started. The journey was only beginning.